Hi and welcome back to my channel. Today I am going to be doing the Booktube Newbie Tag, which I was inspired to do by my friend Kate. I will link her channel down below, but basically I'm following the same questions that she did, and I know that she was inspired by somebody else, so the chain goes on. We're gonna get right into it. So first question is, what are the books that got you into reading? Now, the very basic answer is Inkheart by Cornelia Funke and Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, for different times in my life and for different reasons. If you know anything about me, you already know this. But Inkheart by Cornelia Funke is the book that got me into reading. I have always loved reading, but this was a book that turned it into an obsession, basically. This is my copy that I bought in the 6th grade, so it's 20 years old. Oh my gosh. But yes, this is a brilliant children's fantasy book, and it is just so good. It's following the character of Maggie, who she has the power essentially to read characters aloud from books and bring them to life. And it is well, it was a trilogy. You've got Inkheart, Inkspell, and Ink Death, but recently, just this month, it was released, The Color of Revenge, and I actually finally went to a book event and got to meet the author in person, which was so lovely, and I won't talk about it because I'll start crying, but I finally fulfilled a lifelong dream of getting this specific copy signed. It is literally falling apart, but I love it. I love it so much. It is my most prized possession, and this is the book that changed everything for little old me. And I actually picked it up at a Scholastic book fair, because you can still see the stamp that they gave you back then. So yeah. And then Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. This book is obviously very special. If you know anything about me, you know I'm a big Mary Shelley fangirl, and specifically for Frankenstein. This book I actually first read when I was in high school. It was assigned reading, but it just changed the way I engaged with text. Reading went from becoming I wouldn't say necessarily passive act, like I was still very much engaged with my characters that I was reading about, but Frankenstein was what made me interested in critically analyzing text. I was so intrigued by what Shelley had been able to accomplish and what it said about humanity in and of itself. And that's also really where my love of the Gothic came to be. So I actually collect editions of Frankenstein. I think I probably have about 5 or 6 editions at the minute, but this is a really special one which I had custom made for myself by the owner of Forget Me Not Original. She does cloth rebound books, and I specifically asked for one with like brambles and such, so really special edition this for me. And the other ones that I also included in this that I don't have copies of are the series Warriors by Erin Hunter, which was or is a series about, like, the stories are from points of view of cats, and they're in different clans, and I used to do like fan fiction about it and stuff, but I loved those series. It was so much fun, and I was really hooked on those. And then there was also Tea Witches by I can't remember the name, and Erin Hunter for the Warriors is actually like a fake name. It's 2 different authors that created this new name for the series that they wrote together. But Tea Witches series was by H.B. Gilmore and Randy Raisfield. And that is about 2 sister witches. I was just obsessed with it as well when I was younger. And the Harry Potter series, because I am of that generation, and I remember being so excited every time there was like a midnight release and stuff. So yeah, those were definitely books that really got me into reading, but Inkheart and Frankenstein are the primary ones. What book genres do you read the most? For me, that is Gothic and horror. Quite simply, I'm a creature of habit. I do like to read books outside of my comfort zone, but those are the genres that I like to read the most, and therefore I do read them the most. What book genres do you read the least? That would be biographies or autobiographies. I just don't care enough to read about, a lot of the times, celebrities. I don't really care about reading about their lives. No offense to them. But yeah, if I do read something like that, I tend to listen to it as an audiobook, because I prefer, most of the time they are the ones narrating their own stories, which I think is good. But yeah, I just don't, there's so many other books that I would rather pick up that I just really don't care that much. No, sorry. What is the book you tell everyone is your favorite? These two. Inkheart and Frankenstein. I have nothing to say there. Those are my two favorite books. What is a book you have reread the most? Besides Frankenstein. It would be, I've got two here. So Daisy Johnson's Everything Under. This is just linguistically such an interesting read. I think it's so weird. It's so complex. The prose in it is stunning. And I've never read anything like it. And when I read it, I had never read anything like it, and I still haven't read anything like it to this day. It's set on a canal, and a canal boat home, and is kind of looking at the relationship between a mother and a daughter, but it's also a retelling. And I don't want to give anything away, because I went into this completely blind about what it is and was shook to my core. However, if you do know anything about it before going in, it won't be as big of a shock, because it is a retelling and the twist is very well known. If that, like, I'm trying not to spoil it if you want to go into this blind, but it is fantastic. It is dark, especially the ending, so just be aware of that. Look at trigger warnings if you need to. But I've reread this many a time because of how linguistically interesting and complex it is, but also I wrote one of my master's dissertation chapters on this text, so I reread it a couple times for that as well. But also I just love this book, and I've listened to it as an audiobook as well, and that's fantastic. And then the other one, which I have actually probably reread the most, is Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer. This is one of the new editions, their 10th anniversary special editions, and I had to get one of the new copies because I think that they're brilliant. But I have read this probably about 4 or 5 times by now, and it's on my list to reread again very soon, because I want to reread the series before I read Absolution that just came out this month. I'm actually going to an event about it in, like, I don't know if it's next weekend or the weekend after. I can't exactly, I think it's the weekend after. But yeah, so this one I've read a lot. It is one of those books I think that requires rereading. I haven't read the other two in the series more than once, but this one I've read so many times. I think it's brilliant. It has some elements to do with my research. I think Jeff Vandermeer is this particular book is a really good example of a male author dealing with ecofeminism in a really strong way. And this is also a book that the more you reread it, the more you get out of it. The first time I read it, I was like, what did I just read? Like, it was intriguing and I liked it, but why? And I'm confused. And then with each reread, I've enjoyed it more and more and more. So yeah, definitely worth rereading that one. What is a book that everyone else loved but you didn't? Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. Sorry, I don't have a copy anymore because I gave it away, because I don't tend to keep books that I don't like. I enjoyed the first half of the book a lot. It was fun. The writing wasn't great, but it was fun. The dragons were cool. I was like, yes. I even ordered Iron Flame within that first half of reading because I had enjoyed the process quite a lot. And then the second half of the book was just basically smut. And I mean, that's great for some, but not for me. It was like the entire world just fell to the background for these two characters getting it on all the time. And that's just, there was so much potential in this book. And I think that's what really, really irked me. It could have been so good. And I have nothing against anybody, like, so many people love that book and I get it. It's just not for me, and it didn't live up to the hype for me. A book that definitely deserved the hype for me is actually a book I read many years ago. It's called The Marrow Thieves by Shelly Desmalines. It's an indigenous author, and the text is about, it's this element where people have lost the ability to dream, and somehow they have discovered that the bone marrow of Indigenous people is something that can be extracted and exploited in order to allow people to dream again, obviously at the detriment to the Indigenous people. And so it is a text dealing with colonization and the violence against bodies deemed other. It is a brilliant book. It's won many awards over in North America. It's not as popular over here in the UK, which like I understand, but at the same time I do think like more people need to be reading this book out with just North America. But I also found out while putting this list together that there is a second book within that world that the author has recently published within the past couple of years, so I'm gonna pick that up soon if I can get my hands on it. It's been hard to find copies originally of The Marrow Thieves here in the UK, so I don't know if that's changed over the past couple of years. I don't have my copy anymore because I gifted it to my mother-in-law, but I want to get another copy because, like I say, it was brilliant. And definitely deserves the recognition that it has. A book that you read the fastest would probably be Stillborn. Well, yeah, it would be Stillborn by Guadalupe. This is translated from the Spanish, and I don't tend to read books in like a single day or anything anymore, but this I read almost basically in a single sitting. It was a book, it was one of those incidences where I needed to read this book at this time for me to be so enraptured by it. It was a couple years ago. I was going through some personal things that was really traumatic and difficult for me to cope with, and this book just came in at the right time. From the title, you can probably get the gist of what this book is about, but essentially it is about the decisions that women come to in terms of deciding whether or not to have children, and what that looks like in different scopes, whether that be you have decided not to have children to an extent. One of the characters in this is like so adamant she's sterilized and does not want children. Another has decided that she does want children, but when she's pregnant there's some complications surrounding that and what that means as well, and basically kind of navigating the space of the journey to motherhood, but also discovering how mothering can come in various forms and not just through biological children. But this is a really beautiful book, and some of the prose in it was just stunning as well. And then a book you think deserves more hype. I've got two for this because I think many books deserve hype. The first one being Evie Wyld's The Bass Rock. I really hate the cover of this hard copy edition. The paperback is so much more stunning and actually includes an image of the Bass Rock. It is set in North Berwick in Scotland, and actually when I was reading this I was living in North Berwick, so that was really quite cool. And I also wrote an article that I've had published on this book as well, which I will share in the description as well. I'll link to it. It's open access, and I would love it if more people read that. But the book itself I would love if even more people read. It is about 3 different women in 3 different timelines, different points of views, and how their histories kind of haunt one another, but specifically how violence against women at the hands of men haunt women historically. And it is a difficult read. There are trigger warnings for this, so definitely look into that. But it is such an important read. It came out of the Me Too movement, and she was inspired by, in Australia, there's this like, I forget what exactly the map is called, but it's like a death map essentially of like unidentified women's bodies within Australia, and that's a whole thing in and of itself. But this book is just incredible, and I think more people need to be talking about it, especially in our contemporary times. Like, read this book. It is so powerful. Again, it is a heavy read, but it's very, very powerful, and I think more people need to be talking about it. The second one that I think deserves more hype is newer, I think maybe 2023. Yeah, so The Bass Rock was 2020, this is 2023, and this is called The North Shore by Ben Tufnell. This is incredible, and I haven't heard anybody talk about this book. Like, The Bass Rock, I see the paperback in Waterstones on tables and stuff, so like there's some hype around it, but this, nobody. I find it so hard to find even in bookshops. I don't understand why, because it is brilliant. It is such a beautiful coming together of art and literature. The author himself was a curator, I believe, of art. Previously curator at the Tate Britain, and his knowledge and expertise in art comes through so beautifully in such a small book. The way he describes paintings and statues, it really brings it to life. I was Googling some of the stuff that was popping up because I wanted to visually see what those looked like, and it's stunning. It's kind of like a retelling in a way of Ovid's Metamorphosis, so if you know of that, you kind of know what you're in for. But there's eco-gothic vibes, and the character themselves is very ambiguous. It's stunning. It is so stunning, and this is a perfect read for this time of the year as well. Both of these also are like coastal novels, which is interesting to think of now. But yes, I have literally multiple copies of this because I keep giving it to people. I think this is actually a copy that, this is a copy that is going to be gifted to somebody. So yeah, and I've already gifted a copy to Kate as well, because she studies art and literature in her master's at Oxford, and I was like, you need to read this book. It's brilliant, and it's unlike anything I've ever read. I think that some people might dislike it because it's quite open-ended and ambiguous, but I love these kinds of books, and I just think it's so brilliant. More people need to be talking about this book. If you take away anything from this video, besides Inkheart and Frankenstein, to be fair, go try this if you're intrigued at all by what I'm saying in terms of eco-gothic and metamorphosis and like bodily transformation, and it's just, oh, it's so good. Very passionate about that one. I will hype that as much as I can, since nobody else seems to be. A book you usually recommend. So that would be, I got them all next to me, but they're also balanced very precariously. So the first one would be V. Schwab's The Invisible Life of Addy Laroo. I think this is just such an easily accessible book for anybody who just isn't sure what to pick up. It's like magical historical fiction, and it is a standalone as well, which I think is always helpful when somebody's like just trying to get back into reading. Really strong female character. It's got elements of romance, but like twisted, and not too many trigger warnings. There is one bit that's very short that could be slightly triggering for some people, so I would say proceed with caution there, but it's nothing extensive, and it's important for the story. But this is such a beautiful book, and I feel it's very cozy in a way as well, but yeah, very different to all of V. Schwab's other books as well. And I just think, again, it's super easily accessible, and it's about a woman who is basically immortal, and has made a pact with the devil. And I feel like not really more needs to be said, but hold on, let me give you the little synopsis. So France 1714, a desperate woman makes a desperate deal in the dark, a bargain to live forever but be remembered by none. So begins the invisible life of Addy Laroo, shadow muse to artists throughout history, forgotten friend, confidant and lover, slipping away with the morning light. Addy passes through lives desperate only to leave a trace of herself, until the day she walks back into a small bookshop in Manhattan and meets Henry, who remembers her. After 300 years, Addy's life is restarting, but the devil never plays fair. As Henry and Addy's lives start to intertwine, they must face the consequences of their decisions they've made and the prices to be paid. The Invisible Life of Addy Laroo is a dazzling adventure across centuries and continents, across history and art, about a young woman learning how far she will go to leave her mark on the world. highly recommend it. And then I have Pine by Francine Toon. This is another one that I feel actually is really accessible for most people, especially if you want like something a little bit spooky, perfect for this time of the year. It is set in the Scottish Highlands. The atmosphere of this is brilliant and is what makes this book. It's incredible. It's Wuthering Height level of atmosphere creation, which is not something I say lightly. This is wonderfully written. The only thing about this book for me is that I found the ending very disappointing, but I think that I found it disappointing because of the types of books that I read. So I knew there was so much more potential in that ending. Anybody who's coming from it with a more kind of traditional idea of conclusions of stories, like a lot of the books that I love are ones that are not neatly wrapped up, right? Whereas I know that that's actually an issue with a lot of people with the books that I love, which is why they hate those books, is because they're like, but what is the ending? It doesn't bring everything together or something like that. Whereas this, actually, I think the ending would appeal largely to most people. Again, I think I just went into it with different expectations. But that being said, I still recommend this so much to people. I buy multiple copies to give to people. I still went out and got a copy for myself because I actually borrowed a copy from my sister-in-law because she had recommended it to me. And I will probably reread this again at some point because I still think that it's a brilliant book. It's just the ending I felt could have been so much more, right? So yeah, but still highly recommend it. Also really recommend it for the kind of colder, you know, when the days are really short and it's cold and nippy. You want to read it in the dark. That's when the atmosphere really can get you. But those are two that I definitely recommend and have recommended multiple times to various people, even if I think that their genres maybe, you know, book recommendations I take very seriously, and so I tend to ask a lot of questions if somebody has come to me for a book recommendation, but those are ones that I feel quite confident in recommending in most situations. Then we have a book you thought you would hate. I don't ever read books that I think I'm going to hate, first of all, because what's the point? Like, I just don't understand why you would pick up a book that you already expect to hate, unless you're forced to for like school or something like that. But the one that I didn't expect to enjoy as much as I did is My Best Friend's Exorcism by, I think it's Grady. Yeah, Grady Hendricks. I picked this up purely because of the cover. Literally purely because of the cover. I just thought this was the coolest cover I've ever seen, and I was just going to display it and be done with it because I thought this sounds like quite a gruesome horror novel, and I'm not wrong. But also it's so like, I rated this 5 stars. It was so cozy and comforting. Like, I don't know if cozy horror is a thing, but that is what I felt. This is still one of the most gruesome books that I've read, but somehow also the most comforting. And I didn't expect to be moved by this book in the way that I did. Like, there were tears coming out of my eyes by the end of it. It's just about growing up and friendships and the difficulties there, and the ending really just pulled every one of my heartstrings, and it was an enjoyable read throughout. But yeah, it's a horror book, so just be aware of that. And I also didn't expect to like it because it's like set in high school. I don't tend to read that in and of itself very much anymore, if at all. So this really just came out of nowhere. But this is about 2 best friends, high school sophomores, Abby and Gretchen. But after an evening of skinny dipping goes disastrously wrong, Gretchen begins to act different. She's moody, she's irritable, and a bizarre incident keeps happening whenever she's nearby. So it's, again, it's exorcism, right? Like, possession aspects coming into play. Brilliant book. If you love horror, or if you're interested in horror that is, it's still horror, but it's not really scary, then I would recommend this book, because this is like my comfort read now, which is not... Everybody makes fun of me being like, how is a horror book your cozy comfort read? And I was like, you have to read it to understand. I'm not just making it up, like, I swear. But yes, so that's definitely one. And then a book that made you cry. So 100% Babel by Rebecca Kuang. Oh my gosh, this book destroyed me. I don't cry often. I know I said I teared up with my best friend's Exorcism, but I don't cry often reading books at all. This, it wasn't a gentle cry, which is maybe what happens when I read a book. I was ugly crying when I finished. It was like uncontrollable sobs. It ruined me. I love this book so much. This is another book where I'm like, it deserves the hype. This is incredible. It's a masterpiece. I love it. I will reread it again at some point just because I am so enamored with it. But also, I don't know if I can like be destroyed in that way again because it took an emotional toll on me. Emotional toll on me. But yeah, this one definitely made me weep like a baby. Fantastic. I'm looking at it and I'm like, you destroyed me. A book you wish you could read again. I'm assuming that that question means read again for the first time, because like I can read any book that I want again so long as I have a copy of it. But a book that I would love to read for the first time again would have to be Northern Lights by Philip Pullman. I love this series, but again, like rereading it, I don't think that I'll get that same. There's just something about reading this series for the first time that was so special. And like I don't remember details of books very easily. Like if it's been like a decade since I've last reread something, I probably am going into it almost like it is the first time. Like that's how bad my memory is. But because there's been recent adaptations of this, like I know stuff that I can't unknow, and which will remain there even with me not having reread the book for some time. So I do plan to reread this series sometime soon, but again, I just wish I could return to this series with like fresh eyes and having not read or seen anything previously, because that was, I remember reading this for the first time and how much I enjoyed the series. But again, I think it's very different rereading it now. I still love the series, but there's just something different when you're coming at it again with the knowledge of what's already to come. So yeah, that would be that one for me. And then a book that has your favorite characters. Okay. Hunger Games by Susan Collins. Katniss Everdeen is this question I thought about so much. It has consumed my morning today. But I have narrowed it down to say that Katniss Everdeen is one of my favorite characters ever. Reading this book, when I read this book in college, I just remember being so struck by how strong of a female character she was, and strong in every sense of the word. It wasn't just like, oh, she's smart. Like she was physically strong. She was intelligent in ways that weren't really explored a lot in other books I had been reading. And Katniss Everdeen is incredible. And I have these new editions as well, because I plan to reread the series. And yeah, I still remember catching fire reading that until like 2 o'clock in the morning with an exam the next day, but I physically could not put that book down. Like these books had a hold on me and many of the generation of the time. And yeah, I love Katniss Everdeen, so she is my favorite character, and therefore that is a book that I'm using for that question. Okay, and then the next question is a world you wish you could live in. I am very much basic in that sense. For as a millennial, it would have to be Harry Potter, but like Hogwarts specifically, and everything is fine and dandy and there's no threat. It's just like a cool magic school. That's what I would love, as I'm sure many people of my generation would as well. A book that could cure a reading slump. I don't have a copy. I know I have a copy somewhere, but I can't seem to find it, which is making me think that I gave my copy to someone. As you can see, something I do a lot, but now I don't have a copy anymore, I don't think. But it's the Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society by Mary Ann Schaffer and Annie Brown. It's such a sweet book. If you've seen the film, they do an almost perfect adaptation of the book. It's very on point. But I actually watched the film first and then read the book, and I still loved the book. It's short, it's sweet, it's beautiful, and I would highly recommend it. It's a historical fiction set in World War II, and there's books and there's potato pies. So what more could you ask for? And again, another one with a really strong female character, like really strong. And the ending just made me like so happy. And then the next one is a book that everyone should read. Going off of historical fiction, yet again, would be The Tattooist of Auschwitz by Heather Morris. This book is a book that should be free for everybody, like given to everybody. It is based off of a true story. It is set in World War II. It follows the character of Lael Sokolov, and what it means to exist as a victim within the concentration camps in the Holocaust. I learned so much in this book as well. The aspects, there were bits at the beginning where they were talking about how when things first started, the kind of creation of the camps in a mobile form, I didn't know was real. I googled it, being like, there's no way that this is a fictionalized aspect, right? No. It is a heavy read, obviously, like most historical fiction set in World War II, but also it is one of the most hopeful books. Like, when I give this to people to read, because I do think everybody should read this book, I say it is heavy and it is dark, but one, you need to read it, and two, it is one of the most hopeful books. So hold on to that hope as you're reading it, and you will be rewarded. It is, I cannot believe this is a true story. Wow. And yeah, this is a book that will stick with me as well for a really, really long time. But if you have not read it, definitely you should pick it up, because it's incredible. Then we're on the last 3 questions. So the next one is a book that would make a great movie. And for me, that would be, I've got 2 here. The first one, Beyond the Deep Woods by the Edge Chronicles by Paul Stewart and Chris Riddell. I think this would be a fantastic animated series. It is fantastical, and the illustrations in it are wonderful. Like, can you imagine an animated series with Chris Riddell, who's the illustrator of this as well, like doing the illustrations for the animation? That would be incredible. And basically, there's different series within the series. So I've read all of the Twig series within the Edge Chronicles, and I loved it. Again, these are children's books, but I absolutely adore them. And the back of it says, abandoned at birth in the perilous deep woods, Twig is brought up by a family of wood trolls. One cold night, Twig does what no wood troll has ever done before. He strays from the path. So begins a heart-stopping adventure that will take Twig through a nightmare world of goblins and trogs, bloodthirsty beasts, and flesh-eating trees. One desire alone drives Twig on, the longing to discover his true identity and his destiny. And these are just super fun. And again, I think this would work so well as an animated series, like so well. But then for a live action, I think the book series that has the most potential to be an incredible film, to the level of to become a level of a classic like The Lord of the Rings, and I don't say that lightly, is the 5th season by N.K. Jemisin. So that is the Broken Earth trilogy. This, as a movie, if it's done properly, it could be absolutely incredible. I think it will require a big budget, because this book essentially takes sci-fi and fantasy and merges them in the most beautiful way that I've ever seen a writer do. But there's like, just thinking of it in a kind of visual form, I think that a big budget would be required. But there's so much potential in this for an incredible franchise. I do think it would be difficult, some aspects in the book to have on screen because it is a very heavy text sometimes. It's all to do with slavery and colonization, and again the kind of exploitation and abuse of othered bodies, and some of those scenes are really difficult to read, so I don't know how that would go onto the screen, but also you can't leave those things out because they're so crucial to the story. But ultimately I do think, and I'm pretty sure when I was putting together this list, I think that the rights for this have been purchased by a studio, and that N.K. Jemisin is the one adapting the series for screen. So that's really interesting, and fingers crossed that that's actually a thing that is happening, because again, I'm saying this now, so you know, in a few years, this is gonna be big. And then a book you wish everyone would try to read. I will probably say, obviously, Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. I know that a lot of people hesitate in reading classics, find them very difficult, but I'd also say Dracula by Bram Stoker, which I do have copies of, but for some reason I didn't pull any out. Here's one. This is my least fancy copy, but Dracula, Bram Stoker. I also say this because I had such a difficult time reading this book, and I'm someone who studies Gothic. I've tried to read Dracula at various points throughout my life, and I've always given up. But last year I finally completed reading the book, and it was fantastic. But one of the ways that I was able to read it was through listening to it via audiobook. And again, it's one of my favorite books now, but even I really struggled to really put the effort into reading it, because the first third of the book I think can be what kind of deters people from continuing on with it, but it's definitely worth the read and is important as well in just like understanding literature and the development of literature, and especially the Gothic, and perfect for the season right now. So go ahead, give Dracula a try. And final question is a book you'll never forget. It's a series, so there's 2 books involved once again, but it would be The Monsters of Verity duology by V. Schwab. These books, I will literally never forget reading them. I have reread The Savage Song multiple times, which I'm annoyed. I clearly took the tabs off at some point, because this used to be tabbed like this but more. But anyhow, this is a really interesting look at marketing as well in terms of books, because this is marketed in the US as a YA series, whereas everywhere else it's marketed as adult. And a lot of that has to do with the content within the book. So again, there's trigger warnings, very much so for these books. But essentially within these texts, monsters are being created through the monstrosity of humanity, through violence and crimes and those sorts of things. And so the city is essentially divided by privilege as well, of like who can afford protection against the monsters versus who can't. And there's 3 different types of monsters. There's the Corsai, and I can't remember what the other one is, other than like there's a Sunai, the Corsai, and I can't remember the 3rd type of monster, which is very frustrating. But the Sunai, which are like the most powerful of these monsters, the most kind of like quote unquote dangerous, are actually created through mass unalivings. And the lines in this book of one of the main characters, his name is August Flynn. He is the monster in this context, that is not a spoiler. And his creation kind of story and the lines in that, there's one specific line about like it didn't start with a bang but a whisper, something along those lines. I'm not quoting it directly. Just is like I said, I don't remember details of books very easily, but like I remember almost nearly the line in its entirety, because it is just seared into my brain. I remember getting goosebumps quite literally while I was reading it. It's a fantastic book. It's such a sad book, but also so important. I believe that V. Schwab wrote this as well. She was inspired to write it after Sandy Hook occurred, kind of thinking like this would be a remembrance of the kind of violence that we existed in, hoping that it would be better by the time that these were published, and then, you know, the unfortunate fact of it being worse was very difficult, obviously. And then the other main character in this story is Kate Harker, a very strong, monstrous female human character who is basically trying to like live up to parental expectations and become a monster like her father, whereas August the monster is trying to be more human. It's kind of like looking at those very stark binaries of what is good, what is bad. I do recommend it a lot to people, but you do have to go into it knowing what you're getting yourself into. Also, I do think that the series itself is one of the most it's such a good example of V. Schwab's like education in monstrosity as well. She did a master's in monstrosity and art, I believe, and art does come into play through music in these stories, but her knowledge of monstrosity and her creation of these monsters is so well done in this that I think it really, her background there really shines through in these specific books in ways that is not captured in her other texts. I really think that this is one of her best series, if not, in my opinion, her best series. Yeah, and I don't feel like it has as much hype as the other ones, which I think is interesting, but it is a much darker kind of read, which is something considering most of her books are dark. But yeah, these ones will stay with me for a very long time. And that is the end of the Booktube Newbie Tag. So I hope you enjoyed all those recommendations. I'm sorry I couldn't go into more detail for each of those, but obviously there was a lot of books to get through and I've been talking for a very long time now. The one thing I was going to add at the end of this was the book that I was currently reading, which I don't think that I have on me anymore. Where did I put it? I don't know, it's disappeared. Oh, it's over there. I'm currently reading The Dowry of Blood by, I think it's S.T. Gibson, and that's like a dark Dracula retelling, but from the point of view of Dracula's brides. Really enjoying it so far, and I will be sure to update in future video about like a monthly wrap-up kind of thing. But I hope you enjoyed, and happy reading!